Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to MillerKnoll's Design Perspective. For those of you who are new today, this is a monthly webinar that explores a variety of subjects and resources around the world of design. We host this live seminar so that you have an opportunity to share your thoughts with us and to ask questions. After this session will be loaded onto MillerKnoll's YouTube channel under Design Perspectives, where you can see all of our historical segments, as well as this one. On rinse and repeat, we welcome you to watch them again or to share them with your friends. Today, I'm thrilled to talk to Knoll's creative director, Jonathan Olivares. Jonathan is going to share with us a brief history of Knoll and his mission to reinvigorate the brand's legacy on design. And also, he's going to share with us the design brief and his influence on our newest product launch and planning direction for a portfolio called Skyline. As a reminder, please use the chat for any questions and/or comments or any of the reaction buttons. These sessions are so much more fun when we actually hear from you. So please do respond and ask some questions for us. At this time, I'm going to turn this over to Jonathan so he can get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. Excited for today's little talk, and I'm going to definitely leave some time at the end for questions and answers and just dialogue, which is always fun. Jennifer, can you confirm that you see my deck?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, well, I'll get started. Yeah, like Jennifer said, today's the kind of main bulk of today's presentation is on our new workplace platform called Dividend Skyline that was 3 years in the making. And it kind of I think it embodies everything that Knoll is really about and has always been about. And I kind of always say that Knoll is an interiors brand. Like, yes, we make furniture, but we really make it for the purpose of the A&D and our clients' interiors and a kind of total job that these pieces get integrated into. So I always say like Knoll's furniture is like almost unfinished, right? It's the A&D's responsibility to and joy to specify it, right? So choosing textiles and finishes and colors and materials and configurations and specifications, sometimes special orders. And so we're really in partnership and have always been in partnership with the A&D community. And a little, a little historical fact of it that I always say, and it's not to kind of like make Knoll too grandiose, but Florence Knoll really was the one who created the terminology interior planning and interior design. And she took these principles from Mies van der Rohe and Iliel Saarinen. And Iliel had said, if you work on a table, and he was her mentor and kind of a surrogate father, adopted father. If you design a table, you must consider its relationship to the room. If you work on a room, you consider its relationship to the home or the building, and the building design relates to the city plan. And something Florence Knoll said, I have here, like I have her archival notes here from the archives, and something that always really strikes me that she said is, an intelligent interior plan goes further than furnishings which fill the space. It strikes at the root of living requirements and changing habits. And so I think that's really what we try to do. And I think this is the kind of attitude that Knoll has and why we spend so much time with A&D and the market and our sales and designers to really understand what the tendencies are and how we can partner on projects. And so before we started Dividend Skyline, I started my role as creative director in 2022 in April. And my first 3 to 4 months, I didn't touch design. I just spent time in the markets meeting A&D firms, architects, designers, our sales team associates, our dealers, real estate companies to understand tendencies in real estate and really kind of like put my finger on the pulse and help create the brief for Skyline, so that it's in relationship to these evolving floor plans and tendencies in real estate and planning. Um, and so from that research, we found a lot of like really interesting things that I think you're all familiar with. But as we look back at our workplace systems, we kind of saw like, oh wow, like we don't address any of these tendencies today. Like our planning paradigms are pre-pandemic, and things have really profoundly changed. And so the general tendencies you could say that we're addressing with Skyline is that there's been this in urban centers, there's been a flight to quality as companies need to do more with less, right? So we've seen in most of our markets, we've seen a tendency to condense, from 3 floors to 2 floors to a newer building, right? All the leases in the new buildings, they're at capacity. They're 100% occupancy. It's the older buildings where we see falling occupancy. And so this idea of the trophy office or the cultural destination of the company is really important. And so we that kind of sets the tone for what we do. And also like we really focused on something for you to know under the MillerKnoll umbrella of brands. Like it was my role to really kind of buckle down or double down on the DNA of what Knoll is and who its historical client is and current client is. And what we realized was that Knoll as a brand, it's 100% A&D driven. It's very urban, right? It exists on coasts for the most part. That's the larger market. So we're really reflecting tendencies in urban settings. And our clients tend to be, you could say, spanning from professional services, finance, legal, consulting, over to like sports headquarters and entertainment. And these are kind of companies that really value design and want a high design impact at their brands and have hired an A&D firm to guide them in making these long-term investments in their space. Um, and back to these kind of big tendencies that we're seeing, like, with that condensing and redistributing floor plans, you see in many sectors, with the exception of legal, we're seeing private offices being given up for amenity space. All of this comes down to flex work, right? Like people aren't in the office at a desk 8 hours a day the way they used to be. Of course, some employees are, but the broader tendencies we're seeing flex work as a kind of permanent factor. And so therefore, like two partners may be sharing a private office, or a partner might be that private office needs to double as a conference room when they're not in town. And so um I think or they're working from home, right? So with that comes like, this need for real privacy in the open plan, right? Like let's say you just worked for 15 years to get your private office and now you're being told you don't get one. You want privacy, you want a first class experience. But also general employees coming back from the pandemic are used to privacy, and that era of like the field of open plan height adjustable tables that all over the place with the Purell and the Kleenex box, like it's visual chaos, and people want more privacy than that across the board. So we really considered that as a kind of movement in the office. Another thing that's really important is that I say that like if you weren't a design-minded person going into the pandemic, you were a design-minded person coming out of the pandemic, right? Like everyone redid their kitchen, bought new furniture, spent time on Instagram looking at design solutions. A lot of people don't hire an interior designer. So all of our clients, employees, their expectation for design really raised during that period. And then the prevalence of hospitality, right? Like we've seen in the last decade, like hotels really, and even Starbucks, like emphasize design as a premium experience. So I think, Apple helped that for consumer culture. I think the awareness of design is higher than it's ever been with our clients, employees. And so really spending time to like heighten the details and raise the quality of what we're doing, but also be addressing that flex work and making sure that design underscores the culture and identity of the client. Um, Little history on dividends. So we always make like I said, our clients and your clients, they make long-term investments in their properties. These are 10-year, 15-year, 20-year leases in urban centers for the most part. And so it's very important that we not only be backwards compatible, but also so we set ourselves up to be forwards compatible so that you don't have to rip out your furniture, right? Like you're building on a platform. And so coming back to dividends with Skyline was really an investment in that platform. And I kind of say like we kept the 3-inch panel because that's an excellent way to distribute power in North America, but we kind of renovated everything else. So and so yeah, so you see this 1998, 2010, and then 2025 as the key milestones for dividends, and you can see how they address tendencies in different eras. And both in 2010 and in 2025, we worked with Jeffrey Burnett and Nicholas Dojic, excellent industrial designers who really kind of spend time also with real estate leaders and A&D, and so they were a great partner in this new evolution of Skyline, of Dividend Skyline. We renamed it to kind of really underscore, the transition from Dividends Horizon to Dividend Skyline, and really underscoring that kind of what you see in this image of like the high-rise headquarters, um, the urban headquarters. So I think with the floor plates that are shifting, it's been really important for us to address you know, density, privacy, elevated design. And so we've done a number of things that you'll see throughout this presentation that are really kind of key design moves. Um, we've it's a kind of flexible system, right? It's meant to be adapted and lived with and changed, right? That 3-inch panel is the spine, but all the other elements can be added to it and subtracted to it and reconfigured around it. um the collection of elements we've done now are really underscoring like privacy but also collaboration. I think that I can't underscore that enough. And because of that, like the way we approach these problems and solutions are fundamentally different from, I think back to that notion of striking at the root of living requirements and changing habits. Like we didn't start with a look. We started with a series of challenges that are in the market and then use design to solve those challenges. Let's see. Okay. So I think one of the things that's really important, like the first big move we made, again, back to privacy, was delivering new typologies in privacy. And so we came out with 3 typologies in privacy. So and then we banked on an old one, right, which is the panel. I think we saw a lot of articles 3, 4 years ago about people want the cubicle, but they don't want the cubicle. And I understand why they don't want it. Like no one wants to go back to the 80s or 90s to like Dilbert comics, but still a high registration line is the only way to get total privacy in an open plan. So what we've done is kind of revisit that typology and really upgrade it in a way where you don't read it as cubicle, you read it as a kind of small scale architecture. And that came down to details like closing the gaps on the panels, creating 18 new veneers. We're in the process of matching our wood grain laminates to those veneers, new paints and CMF, but also cleaned up details that you'll see later, like mitered corners on 3-inch panels, closing those funky half-inch gaps that were meant for like 200-pound PEDs back in the 90s. Like we closed those gaps to, I think it's like an 1/8 inch, the absolute minimum we could get away with. So those panels start to read as an architectural system, not a cubicle. Um, the other shelves, the shelves you're seeing on that kind of first class cabin and here are louvered open shelving. This is meant to create a new kind of boundary. Go back for just a moment here. You can see that that boundary divides 2 workstations. So it creates a new form of privacy that allows light to pass through from the perimeter to the core, but it also signals a kind of design aesthetic. And then again, it's creating privacy while remaining somewhat open and porous, so that you're aware of who's next to you, but you're not engaging with them, right? So it's a slightly new typology. We're also bringing in REF, which is our historic uh, private office system. We're bringing that into the open plan. REF is sort of priced for the market fight, right? I always say Knoll is a kind of medium to premium company, and you can always find economy by scaling back CMF and some value engineering by still keeping the Knoll DNA. And so that's a really important part of dividends to mention too. But back to REF, you can see it here in the open plan and really creating that parity, that aesthetic parity between private office and open plan. I think that's something we heard a lot is like, how can we take care of our employees in the open plan who have lost their private office and elevate the overall design language? I'm really excited to see how you will interpret dividend skyline through specials and even through configuring existing product. So Pernilla Orsted, who's an architect Knoll works with to plan our showrooms and our installations, she needed she needed a kind of boundary between the aisle condition and the stations. And so she came up with this shelving configuration you're seeing here. It has a 3-inch panel in the middle, standard ref shelving on the outside, and the add-up louvered shelf that rests inside the panel and is supported by the panel. And so that way we can have like, powered LED, we can have printers under there. But also like this was just her solution using existing parts. There's nothing special order entry about this. This is just using good old dividend Skyline parts, or good new dividend Skyline parts, I should say, to achieve a new result. And so I'm really excited to see how you'll interpret this as you become more familiar with it and start planning with it. Um, Another very important part of this system is I always say kind of like the A&D community was a little bit of a victim of the furniture industry's lack of foresight. Like, I about might get in trouble for saying this, but basically, if you look back 10 years ago, like during that period where ancillary or lounge furniture was really booming for the industry, and everyone was looking to WeWork as the kind of model, or the tech firms as the model. And those places were eclectic by nature, right? They want a Danish chair, an Italian chair, and they're going to mix it on a floor plan. So the larger American players in the industry, they didn't have this kind of furniture, and so they kind of went out and bought it all, right? So they bought, beautiful Danish companies, beautiful Italian companies, and they've accumulated some of the best design brands in the world. But, and here's the but, is that Knoll is not an eclectic design brand, and it never has been. Knoll is a planning brand. We're a brand where you're considering the total interior, and so specification is really important. We need to be able to offer a solution that not only works with the interior intentionally, but also can be specified in all of Knoll's CMF, and blend with our existing systems. And so we worked on Skyline Lounge as the first kind of open plan systematized lounge, right? So you can have it in lounge height and work height, so you get proper posturing, and you can specify it in all the Knoll textiles, but also we've developed some really new beautiful panel textiles so that you can blend the panel with the seating into one landscape. And here you're seeing it with inside of a workstation where it plans dimensionally with the workstation and enhances that workstation into a kind of first-class cabin, allowing collaboration. And this is something that we really just haven't seen, is a lounge embedded in a station properly, dimensionally, and blended. Later, we'll get into some of the new paint finishes, but here you're seeing a new paint we developed called Champagne. And Champagne is really blending across from the table to the panel to the shelving, and it blends with the lighter wood range of our wood veneers. And so that way you can create a continuous architectural landscape rather than a collection of bits and parts. Here you see Skyline Lounge. in really like the breakout amenity space. And so what you'll notice is like the screen height here registers back to our kind of best-selling panel height screens. So you're creating consistent registration lines across the space. Again, like this plans on the same 3-foot module that our systems plan on. Um, and it's COM friendly, right? So this can be specified in any number of ways. It gives you a kind of, I always say like people want lounge at the office, but they don't really want like, they don't want to be falling asleep or slouching. So that we really worked on the posture of these pieces, both at lounge height and at work height, to be supportive and to really say work. These can also be powered so that you can plug in. Yeah, I think we're really excited about it. Also very excited to see how A&D will use it, interpret it. Um, Here you see it, this kind of, again, like the harmony of material, but also the way that these things are all conceived together, right? So another one of our new spatial typologies is the cubby, which you're seeing in the center image here. These are add-up cubbies uh, to allow storage for flex work. On the left, you're seeing a really thin panel. These are some of the new privacy typologies we've introduced. And on the right, this is maybe the most radical kind of thing I've seen in a while in the industry, which is like this is sort of the anti-eclectic and architecture first lounge system. So to be able to blend work height lounge seating with a 3-inch panel, with a glass add-up that again gives you awareness of your neighbor, but also gives you a level of privacy. Like this is sort of lounge as architecture. So it's a totally different proposition from what exists on the market today. And it also, of course, the 3-inch panel delivers power in a really simple way. Um, so again, like back to these privacy measures, right? Like here you see the louvered shelf, also blending tone on tone with champagne. I think I can't underscore that enough. Like when I looked at the history of office systems and what the offering in the industry was in 2022, I looked around and I thought like, wow, like everyone like the top cap is a different color from the end cap, the table leg is a different color from the panel. Like it was just kind of creating a little bit of a visual cacophony. And so that for me was just like a really important problem to solve. And not just in one colorway. Like we have 18 veneers. We're going to have three metallic paints, manganese, bronze, and champagne that each blend with a different range of the wood veneers. We're continuing to invest in these metallic paints because they reflect what's around them and they blend with other materials really well. Um, and so like again, like back to this kind of refined fit and finish, like, but also some of the new features that we're doing, like on we have mitered corners on a thin screen. I think it's a 5/8 inch, uh, so 3/8 inch screen, right? And so that I kind of looked around the landscape of the screens out there, and I was like, well, why are they all PET? Like I get it, PET looks great in my car trunk. But like what, and it's plastic. Like, why would I want plastic and this kind of car trunk aesthetic in a pro service or an entertainment headquarters, right? So creating a screen that's architectural was very important. Introducing beveled surfaces to all the table edges so that we have that's the second image. We have thin, everything's reading thin. And again, that we use the same thickness everywhere. So 3/8 inch on the mitered on the screen add up screen, 3/8 inch on the table, 3/8 inch on the louvered shelves, and incidentally, that's the same thickness as the top cap. So all these elements are registering together in a kind of consistent architectural language. In the center here, you're seeing like it's a small innovation, but in the end, in systems, the small innovations are the big ones. And again, like A&D being a little victimized by the industry. Hat came out like wildfire, right? Like within between 2010 and 2013, like the whole industry went wild for hat tables. It was ergonomic, gave you employees choice, sit and stand, and basically the typology was treated like a hot commodity, right? Like make them fast, make them cheap, and they all kind of look the same, and they have this like ski leg, and they're meant to be moved around all the time. But like I said, like Knoll's clients tend to make longer term investments, and our clients and your clients are not necessarily reshuffling the office every 3 months, right? Their stations are conceived to be inherently flexible over time. So you can add a storage element, you can add a desk, but they're not like the sort of systems that are being dragged around a floor plan by a facility management team and put in storage and brought back out. So we thought, why can't our hat leg become a little piece of architecture? Can we tie it back to the panel? And that way you just read a single column on the edge. And on the second image, you're also seeing a kind of monolithic, shrouded hat panel that creates a really architectural moment on an aisle condition. Um, yeah, and then on the far right, you're seeing the those minimal seams I described on the panels, right? Like really creating making the panel a little work of architecture versus this kind of commodity, clunky office system cubicle thing. Um, and here you kind of see it all working together, right? Like you know, the lounge height is echoing the height of the privacy screen, that's really thin and architectural. You see the shrouded leg in the aisle condition. In the background, you see the first class cabin for the person who maybe lost their private office. You see the light passing through from the perimeter to the core, which is very important. And private offices used to do that for us, or the ones that are getting removed, you know, used to do that. So it's very important that we continue that private office feeling, but move it into the open plan. Then you're seeing ref storage occurring in the open plan, again, like kind of elevating the quality of the open plan into something of a private office feeling while still being price sensitive. And then on the upper right, you also see these cubbies, right? Like the cubby is, we had a lot of requests in the market for like, oh, we don't want assigned storage. You know, you end up with like the gym shoes in there and like somebody's, you know, lunch, and let's take that away and create a new paradigm for storage that's really about flex work. So somewhere to put your coffee, somewhere to put your phone while it charges. You know, maybe you're putting your sunglasses in there, or your, you know, stack of papers. And another thing that this cubby does is it cleans up the visual landscape of the kind of jagged, chaotic hat effect, right? So those hat tables, they would just create this kind of like super messy landscape. And these, with the cubby is as tall as the hat can really go. So that cubby creates a consistent registration line across the landscape, which is also good for acoustics. And the last thing it does is it provides a really natural perch, right? So if you're on an aisle, you can perch on the cubby, which is about, you know, a foot deep, and you can chat with your associate, right? And then, you know, if that chat goes a little bit longer, you might then break out into the lounge. And so, yeah, this image kind of says it all. And again, like back to that Florence Knoll notion of planning, like this is what Knoll helps you do. It's not about the individual. I mean, yes, we have individual parts and features and details, but the goal of it is that it comes together into your vision of what an interior can be, and a total environment where everything is kind of coordinated. Um, yeah, just to kind of go back to like synthesis here, like we have the Skyline Lounge, we have the new height adjustable table typologies, we have the refined fit and finish and trim, open boundary shelving, new work surfaces. We have the thin edge, an organic shape that's kind of like a lily pad, but also the really thin version, the ref storage in the open plan, the cubbies, the thin screens, and recessed glass into gallery panels, which is another detail that's really, you know, kind of exciting. Yeah, and so thank you very much. We made it a half an hour. We're open for questions. We can kind of go back, look at other images. There's one thing I realized I may have uh, glazed over, so we can go kind of let's move. We can move back and forth and chat a little bit.
Thank you, Jonathan. And there was something, that really struck me as you were talking about Skyline, and the enhancements, and this idea of flight to quality, understanding that everyone's looking for design now, right? Associates, as they come to the office, whether it's a new office or their existing office, they're looking for an experience and they're looking for design. They want to see something there that they don't have at home because they're making that effort. That idea of flight to quality and this first class cabin struck me. How great would it feel to say to your associates, you're coming to your new space and welcome to your first class cabin versus welcome to your workstation. Psychologically, that just feels really uplifting. And one of the fundamental differences, I think, from Knoll versus any other brand, and especially as you're looking at systems, but all of the products, is this ability to really curate with A&D firms. And you touched on this a little bit as you spoke about the open shelves, talking about how that was really born out of a need, a design challenge, right? You needed a way to divide space for individuals and in the collaborative areas, but it was really born from a panel surrounded by ref storage and then finding a way to bring that horizon level up with the open shelving. Can you speak a little bit more about that curation that we can do with designers as they look at the portfolio of Knoll and they start to work with our distribution partners and they're working with their partners in their local markets? What's the best way to approach that and really get around the table early to make those things happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in a way is the root of what Knoll does, right? Like Knoll is a brand that was born or really birthed A&D, right? And is inherently tied to A&D. And so I think the way that Knoll has historically worked is that like, A&D kind of knows the Knoll product a little bit, will come in, learn more about it, and then come back with like sketches basically and say like, this is kind of what we'd like to do. And then in partnership with Knoll sales associates, they kind of come up with a solution, right? So um, what we've tried to do with Skyline is to give you, like I always say, Knoll is the farmer's market and A&D is the chef. And so what we've tried to do here is to just give you like a wide array of new ingredients that you can cook with, from typologies to kind of design details and features to CMF, right? And when you multiply that, planning paradigms, design details, and CMF, you multiply those together, it's really infinite what can be come up with, what you can come up with this, right? Like no two chefs will walk out of the farmer's market with the same thing, right? Or cook the same meal. So I think that's really the spirit of the collaboration, and really welcome you to, study the offering through the images that are available, but then, early on engage with a Knoll partner, MillerKnoll partner who's familiar with the Knoll product, and really kind of cook up something fun. And technically, typically that process starts early on in the job, right? So that there's coordination and you have plenty of time to like specify it the way you want, but also meet the budget. Again, like that medium to premium scale for Knoll has always been really critical, to be able to span that gap together. So yeah.
As Florence always said, no compromise, right?
Yeah, yeah,
What
yeah,
do we need to do to make this work for you? Which I always love. And it's
yeah.
very freeing feeling when you're looking at a design concept. We have a nice question from Peter here. What would be the design considerations from northern climates, buildings with less windows, versus southern climates, buildings with more windows that we should consider?
I mean, I think so. Buildings with less windows are, then it's even more sensitive that you would want your light to pass through to the core, right? So I think that's critical. Buildings with more windows, there it's a balance. Like I remember going years ago to the Morphosis, Tom Main designed LA Caltrans, Los Angeles Caltrans headquarters, and it was a state-of-the-art building. It had a massive Lightwell arcade through the center. All the external windows were programmed with louvered screens to open with the moving sun and close with the moving sun to control the climate inside. And then I walked in and they had spent all the budget on the building and they still had their, 6-foot cubicles from their old office that got moved into this new building. So it just completely killed the light. I mean, the furniture destroyed the purpose of the building. It was absolutely mind-blowing to me. It was a tragedy, really. And so I think I think what we've done with Skyline is to give you a number of solutions for mitigating both through porosity and opacity light, right? So everything from like the integral glass screens that go into gallery panels, which you couldn't do before. The louvered shelves, of course, as a totally translucent device. The panels, add-up panels, both on systems and soft seating. Um, bringing that high panel back in a way that's like super elegant. Again, like the mitered corner that's on those 3-inch panels we have two patents on it, and it's so beautiful. And like real systems nerds see it and they're like, oh my God, like why didn't anyone do this before? So I think like the giving the quality to the 3-inch panel by cleaning the details, that gives you another option that is architectural, right? Like you're not going to ruin your building like LA Caltrans with these, because you can measure them and dial them. And I encourage multiple heights throughout a space. Think of it as a landscape, right? So the soft seating is low. The panel, it comes up to match the desk panel, right? The 3-inch panels can be spec'd at a higher specification. The add-up glass invites translucency, right? I think of it as a palette of how do you, both for northern and southern climates, like you have the tools here to do what's appropriate for your space. And again, like, no two designers will solve it the same way, but we've given you like a wide toolkit here to address that. Hope
As
that
you were talking
helps.
about ref storage coming into the open plan, um, it- there were oftentimes prior to Skyline, as we were planning, we would bring ref elements into that open plan, right? It kind of helps you with hierarchy, but there was sometimes a challenge and some customization that needed to take place. It sounds like Dividend Skyline is opening that window up a little bit, making some of these things more standard. And can you maybe address some of those types of things with the storage?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what we've done is we did really two big efforts in terms of merging portfolios. So one was bringing ref into the workstation, into the open plan, and that meant standardizing dimensions across the board, right? So all the dividends is now spec'd to fit into every single standard configuration of a workstation. And then the other thing we did was bring in the lounge to the workstation. So every element of this lounge is configured to correspond with every element of the workstation as well. But the other thing we did with ref is we've done things that uh, you've never had in an open plan before. So like bringing the coat storage into the first class cabin. This is totally interesting. Like I remember Antenna had done this, 15 years ago, but I think it was a little bit ahead of its time. I think people weren't used to that idea of the open plan being that curated. Um, and so the idea of really bringing that in today, when there's this like, exodus to the open plan in many industries, is really timely now. And doing that with ref as a standard is great, and everything matches panel heights, and it all plans as one thing.
We have a question. How do you think end users that are utilizing the open shelving, once they move into the space, how do you think or anticipate that they might make it their own? Are there some design scenarios that you thought of, intentional decor, or was the intention to leave it open when you're thinking about
Yeah.
that open shelving?
I mean, I think it really depends on the client. We had awesome success with like we at Design Days last year, I went out and bought all of these like records, like 12-inch records, and I displayed them on the shelf. I'll show you the condition on this shelf, right? And you can see here, this is actually New York City. There's stones, there are books. I like to say that like all of our clients make something, right? like they win awards, right? Like a legal firm might have awards, a record company has records, an architecture firm has models, an advertising firm will also have awards, but also, documents that they've made, brochures, um, they might there might be an element of like content on an iPad to show clients, right? Like there's also libraries of information that are relevant to meetings. And piles of paper, like some folders. So I think the way that these get animated are really beautiful. Like we had, like in Chicago, I had went out and bought all these records, and then by pure chance, we were touring a music record label who's looking at a new headquarters, and they came through and they were like, "Oh my God, like these records are so cool. Like who bought these?" And it brings an element of humanity into the office. So I really encourage. We're working on a new project now in Texas, where there's a desire for biophilia, right? Like people really want plants in this headquarters, and it's a 2,000 workstation headquarters. So we've proposed a couple of solutions. Like one is adding these onto, and they want them on workstations. So we've proposed adding the shelves onto the workstations and then having it covered with pots and plants and, you know, like plants that hang down, and then we also propose taking the cubby and flipping it so that it's not in facing, it's top facing, and then filling that with planters. So yeah, I think I mean, again, like as we begin to work with clients and their desires and ideas from A&D, like these things take on a life of their own. And then for the diehard purists, an empty shelf always looks great in as a louvered solution. Yeah.
We have a question. How would Skyline address sound? And is there any way to control the sound given an open plan?
Yeah, we did think about this. This is an important part of the whole strategy. I mean, obviously, you will never gain the acoustic privacy that you would have in a private office. And so that's why I said, like, with the exception of legal, where things are always and only private, we've seen this tendency into the open plan. I think with like a record music company, there isn't that high level of privacy. So I think that, within the open plan, we've tried to come up with a lot of different solutions for you, from totally private, from the most private to the least private, right? So the first class cabin is the most private, right? We're using, 3-inch panels with acoustic, inlays. There's the textile. You can have textile as an option. You can have wood as an option. And then there's the addition of upholstery sometimes, which is also acoustically buffering. This is sort of the most acoustic solution you could say that we have. Even little things like, obviously here in the lounge seating, this doesn't have any acoustic privacy, but that glass screen kind of lets you know who's next to you. So we think a lot about choreography, right? Like I now know that the guy I was going to talk about is sitting next to me because I can see him. So I'm going to meter that conversation, right? The add-up cubbies are also creating an acoustic buffer to a degree, more than if they didn't exist. As their own, they're kind of sound enclave. As they get filled with things, that becomes another acoustic layer of buffering. Again, this isn't 100% privacy. No, we're not trying to say that this is a replacement for a private office or an enclosed space. But, like adding a wooden screen onto a desk and adding that wooden screen onto every desk is going to create an acoustic buffering across the entire floor plan. So that cacophonous sound is going to come down a little bit. You're still going to need acoustics on your ceiling and floor, but that does contribute quite a bit to the landscape. Again, like sinking the lounge a little, lounge height that goes a little less high and adding the textile screen, that's also giving you a layer of acoustic buffering. As you go lower, your head becomes farther from the person who's standing and walking away. So that and that gives you a little heightened feeling of privacy. Obviously, the first class cabin is still, like I said, the most. But yeah, again, like you repeat these wooden goods all over the floor, and you're going to be metering acoustics a little bit, reducing cacophony. Yeah, so these are sort of the few ways, 4 or 5 ways in which we address acoustics in the open plan. It's something we really thought about, and short of building a enclosed box in the open plan, like at workstation wise, these are doing, they're playing their part as best they can. So.
We often show our Knoll textiles, draperies, things like that too in our spaces, and that can certainly help in the surround when you think about that total environment, that total design. We have a question. We've talked a lot about quality and things like this, and we had a question about value engineering. And if you have a client that has an attraction or affinity towards certain aspects of Skyline, are there ways to plan with it to think about that economic price line that we might have to hit sometimes?
Oh yeah, totally. Like I mean, I can't say it enough. Knoll is medium to premium, right? So we're not going to go fight it out with the cheapest of the panel systems. It's just not in our DNA. But we're also not you know, the luxury private office from Italy, right? Like we are medium to premium within the workplace, right? And Knoll has always been operating at that level. And so as in our showrooms, we always and only show premium because it's the biggest, impact you can make. Our showrooms need to be wow, right? But the key to medium is CMF and specification, right? So, you go from a veneer to a laminate, wood grain laminate, that's a big cost savings. You go from a really luxe textile to a, value-based panel textile. That's another way. You can, substitute elements, right? So we'll have, for instance, all these different privacy measures that we have come in at different prices. So there may be one that's more economic than another. Um, the other thing I would say is like, some of these hat legs we've done, like the shrouded leg on the aisle condition is a beautiful architectural element, but it's a premium object, right? So that may be a question of, why then we made our post, which is more medium priced, really beautiful on an aisle condition as well. And then there's always a panel that you can add if you want to shroud it. So I think when we design these products, we think about, backwards and forwards compatibility, and we think about medium to premium, and that's kind of an XY axis, right? And so that's always really critical to the design strategy. It's not the kind of sexy pitch, right? But it's always there. Like it's the foundation of what Knoll does.
And the foundational dividends product was designed to, be enhanced when we added Horizon and then further enhanced as we added the Skyline features. So, as you said, going back to maybe a more traditional planning for maybe parts of this space that you might be designing might be a way to do that as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, you saw this product evolve through concept. Um, was there anything that, as it came to fruition and it's become a real product, that has stood out as a highlight to you that maybe turned out even better than maybe you might have hoped it would be?
Um, project like it's always like the design process is not a scientific process, right? Like the research is even not a scientific process. Like as you speak with A&D, it's an organic conversation. So you start to hear things and pick up on things. And it's my role to be the editor of what I pick up on, right?
Sure.
And synthesize that. And then working with our design partners, it's also my role to be the editor and the kind of orchestra conductor, right? And so when I work on dividends, I'm thinking about what we're doing in seating. I'm thinking about what we're doing in lounge. I'm thinking about what we're doing on colors and materials and finishes. And so I have that kind of 30,000 elevation view on what Knoll is doing, where we hire designers to kind of really focus in on one thing. Um, so that's a little bit the way the process works. I think like the nice surprises were, as you prototype things, things don't work. Not everything works, right? And so you evolve, you adapt, things have to kind of be modified. That's always a really fun part of the process. I think like our in I don't know, probably not many of you skateboard, but I do. And on Thrasher, like the Bible of skateboarding, there's always a section called My War, and it's about each one features one skater who fought a war against one trick, right? So it'll be 50 attempts on the same handrail until they get it, and then they get it. And I would say that the thin, it looks simple, but that thin 5/8 inch add up veneer screen, that was my war. Okay. Like that was like so many prototypes. We tried so many ways of, I mean, it looks so simple, but you would have no idea how much we broke ourselves to get that done right. And so, we started with a design that wasn't, we could manufacture it, but we couldn't finish it. Then we changed materials, and it was like, okay, that material isn't getting what we want aesthetically. So then we went back to the wood and then found a different supplier. And like our head of engineering and I were like on the phone every day, like calling each other, texting each other, like, how's this going? How's that going? Like it almost died at one point, and then we just like kept fighting. Anyway, it was my war. Finally, we landed the trick, got it done. Looks great, price as well. But yeah, that screen in particular, we bled over that screen. I have scars from that, but really proud of it.
About the
Yeah,
good fight.
that's
So
this one here for reference.
we did have someone ask, if we are planning a total office and we have some private offices that might be surrounding some of these areas here in the open plan, what do you feel might be a good coordinated product to go in those private offices that would blend well with Skyline?
Yeah, I mean the interesting thing is like so Skyline was largely informed by what we do in private office, and now we're starting to see requests for Skyline elements in private office going back, right? So like the lounge seating, for instance, that can embed into a ref or a cove office plan. Obviously, the 18 new veneers we developed go across both office and open plan. The paints, the metallic paints, allow you to blend from across all product, so from office to open plan. The shrouded leg we've developed here is perfectly capable of tying back to a ref cabinet, which can be put up against a wall in an open plan, right? So there's so many ways. Like again, like we don't even know how many ways there are to combine these things yet. But there are going to be. It's really up to you, the A&D, to kind of look at the parts and figure out like, oh, how can I do it? We'll obviously be proposing planning paradigms, and we'll start to show this in our showrooms. But there's no doubt, like so many ways in which you can kind of cross-fade private office into open plan, and especially once we start, what we're almost done, and there's already many options within our wood grain laminates that can be paired with our new veneers, and we'll have even better pairings in the coming years. That's a great way to say that, to blend in one colorway, but scale down to medium price as you move into the open plan. So yeah.
You typically reference this quote from Eliel Saarinen, where you're talking about always design, a thing by considering the next thing in its larger context. And you typically tie this back to Florence, right? Eliel being one of Florence's, greatest mentor. One of the things that she really took from him was this idea of total job or total design. And that's really that perspective. She really took and influenced Knoll when it was owned specifically just by Hans. It was more of a furnishings company. When Florence came into the picture, it became a design company because she brought that aspect and then interior planning. I often think, what makes Knoll such a special company is the associates that work for the organization, but also the associates that come in that plan, the designers and the partnerships that we have. And there's a wonderful, partnership relationship, that we have in you. You brought to us, Jonathan, this total design part of yourself. And I would love for you to share a little bit about your other design interest with the design community because it's interesting and it's fascinating. And I think it's what makes you so special and allowed you to create this iteration for Knoll and this legacy. And so could you share a little bit about some of the things that you do to inspire yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is so important, right? I mean, first I could just say quickly, like back to Knoll for just a moment. Like the old Knoll employees would say, I bleed Knoll red, you know? And like this is the factory workers gave me this when I first started. It was like just at the beginning of the merger and MillerKnoll, so I still have got the Knoll logo with my name on it. I don't know if you can see this shirt. Can you see it?
Yes, it's
Okay,
great. We
cool. Here,
actually
I'm
had a couple
gonna stop.
comments.
I'll stop sharing just since can we make me, am I big if I'm talking?
You are.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
So for a little bit of a bigger photo for y'all who couldn't see, but in college, when I first started studying design, one of my professors was doing the showroom planning for Knoll, longtime showroom planner for Knoll. My thesis advisor, Bruce Hanna, we relaunched his Hannah Morrison chair last year. His class, we would just kind of sit around smoking cigarettes and talking about films and books and I don't even know what I did for my thesis, but we were just talking for like a year. It was really impactful for me. And obviously the work of the masters from Breuer to Mies to Saarinen to Frank Gehry to Robert Venturi, Denise Scott Brown. And then I was lucky Knoll was my first client when I started my practice in 2007. And we did books together, we did a chair, and through Knoll I got to meet the previous design directors, not only my predecessor Ben Pardo, but his predecessor Carl Magnuson, and then his predecessor Jeffrey Osborne, who was appointed by Florence Knoll. So I'm the fifth design director. The only one I never met was Florence Knoll. She passed before I could meet her. So I really kind of like this. This is a kind of I carry the torch, like I try to bring that energy. But yes, I couldn't do it without the other side of my life, which is my personal design practice that I've been practicing since 2007. At one point, after like practicing, like living, eating, and sleeping design for like 15 years, I got serious burnout, and I almost left the field. I was like 2015, I was like looking at Porsche mechanic school. I was looking at potentially buying a skateboard factory. And then I took some time off and I just went back to my roots and I started skateboarding again and I started looking at like street culture and photography of people like Ari Markopoulos, and Mark Gonzalez artwork. And so all of this kind of really fed me in my practice. And now I call it loiter mode, where like I need a lot of time in the week to just do nothing. Like I need to drive around LA and take pictures of this and look at that and sit at the coffee shop and go get my hair cut, watch a matinee, like go to the Russian bathhouse. This is where, drive around. I'm into motorsports, so do a canyon or a mountain drive. Like all of this is kind of where I do all of my thinking. Like I don't sit at a desk and think. That's just not my style. I need to be like moving around and taking things in. And so that's kind of what lets me do my work. And then I bring all that energy back to my role at Knoll.
I was reading up on some of your work, and you talked about while you were at Pratt, you used to travel to London and you used to visit, the design museum, and you loved it. And then you were fortunate enough in your professional life to have an exhibit there called Skateboard, where you were able
Yeah.
to kind of share this other love. But one of the things you talked about when you talked about that exhibit was you quoted Eames, and he said, "Take your pleasure seriously."
Yeah.
And that's what I think about when I think about you and your work.
100%. Thank you. Yeah.
And we really appreciate your time today, sharing this with us. If there's any additional questions, pop them in the chat quick. We will upload this session, and we are certainly able to answer your questions as we move into the future. Skyline is available now. If you are located next to any one of our showrooms, you will see the product in the showroom. So call your design partners at Knoll and get yourself scheduled to come in and take a view and kick the tires. We'd love to get your feedback. And you will, I did see some comments in here. Could we see some images with people? Could we see some images in different types of architecture? There's many more images and things that are going to be coming. So please work with your local partners to ask for those renders, for the photography. And as we have more installations, we will have more to share along the way. So thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for joining.
Have a great day.
Bye.